Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome to Books That Make You. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy, and today we're talking about books that make you a vampire expert. Vampires. Who doesn't love these bloodsuckers? I mean, they're one of the most beloved topics in all of genre fiction. Vampires, they've been given makeovers over the years since Bram Stoker originally introduced us to Dracula, but let's face it, there is just something about the vamps that we absolutely love sinking our teeth into. Is it because they terrify us as much as they intrigue us? I mean, they promise immortality, but at what price? And they have these amazing powers, but they're so vulnerable. Daylight kills them in an instant. And let's face it, okay? Let's just be honest. Vampires, well, they can be sort of romantic or even downright sexy. Our guest today is known as the vampire expert by MSN, and she is highly regarded for her vampire novels in the Blood Inheritance Trilogy. As well, she is known for historical romance, retold fairy tales, which we just love, dystopian, and other genre mashups. Adrienne Monson is our guest today, and she's also accomplished in many other areas. She mentors aspiring authors, she directs and participates in writing workshops and editing, and she even judges several different writing contests. Adrienne, hello, welcome to the show.
Hello, Desiree. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, this is exciting because it's vampires, and you are known as the vampire expert. So let's start by just telling us, what do you think it is about vampires that absolutely lures us in?
Oh, well, that is a fun subject for me to talk about, at least. I feel like you sort of already hinted at what I would speculate myself, Desiree, and that is the idea of immortality, something that man has wanted since the beginning of time. You know, death is very frightening. It makes us feel vulnerable, that you can't fight the impending doom that will come at the end of your life one day. And immortality is alluring, and yet there's a cost, right? You have to go to your darker side of yourself in order to embrace that. It's like making a deal with the devil. And I think there's just something about that, of opening yourself up to the darker side that you try to suppress throughout life, that has been very enticing to a lot of people over the years.
And I think you're digging into it right there, too, because it's almost a taboo. It feels like we should not want this, but yet underneath it all, that's what we crave, right?
Yes, definitely. It's that temptation that you're trying to resist.
And then that weaves into why and how vampires can be considered sexy. Because let's face it, if we go back to Nosferatu, that's not a sexy vampire. That's scary and gross and disgusting. But over the years, it seems like literature writers have taken that idea and really dug into that idea of there's something really compelling and interesting here.
Absolutely, yes. And I think that, you know, the imagination probably having a lot of fun with the idea of a vampire character. I also really relate vampires to being one of the pioneers of an anti-hero type of character in literature. And that wasn't necessarily popular until maybe the last 10, 15 years to have an anti-hero. But now that's a lot of what we see in many different forms of genres. But I feel like vampires were kind of on that cutting edge, right on the cusp of the beginning of having empathy for somebody who's a darker, monsterish character.
That's a great way to put it. You're absolutely correct. Because we see in ourselves the vampire, they still have human desires, emotions, fears, and wants, but then they're driven by this darkness, and I think we can all relate to that.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
It seems, too, that vampires, especially within fiction, tend to weave in and out of style. I've even seen, and you probably have seen this too, being a writer and being part of the literary world, you've seen it where agents are just like, nope, no vampires, don't want to see vampires, give us zombies now. Or give us mermaids. Why do you think that is? Vampires seem to kind of go in and out of style, just like clothing.
Yes, well, and actually that's kind of a funny story because my publisher almost didn't publish me just because it was vampires. It was the person who was in charge of going through the slush piles really liked my story and kept pushing it. And he kept saying, no, vampires are a dying thing. I don't want vampires. And then the person gave it to his wife and she loved it and she convinced him to publish me.
Oh, that is so funny. And
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I actually got my books published on that downward of vampires being popular, which is sort of an interesting time. Mm-hmm. But there's always people who are in the market that love vampires. It's really more of the editors and the publishers that get sick of them. And they think, oh, if I have to read one more manuscript with a vampire, I am just going to cut my eyes out. Let's go to something else. I feel like really it's more that than it is of trying to cater to what the market wanted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, vampires, just like zombies and so many others, they have their allure. And when you're a reader, people who are voracious readers, they will just keep going through. That's why you have a series, I'm sure, because they crave the story. They'll keep going and going.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so much fun to be an author, because you've got readers, emailing you and saying, hey, when's your next book coming out? I can't wait. They'll absorb everything you put out there, and it makes it really fun to write.
I bet it does. So let's talk more specifically about your series. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about it, set the stage, and give us an idea of who the characters are?
Sure. It's a little unique. It is a trilogy, and there's a prophecy about a child who will be the game changer between these two species. There's the vampires, and the book also talks about how the vampires came into existence through different wars. And then it also talks about how they created these immortals to combat the vampires. So it's not necessarily werewolves, it's just immortals that never die and they heal really quickly. And so they're the ones that are trying to fight off the vampires and just eradicate them from the earth. And the main character, her name is Leisha, and she was around when vampires came into existence. And the night that her husband was becoming an immortal, she was taken and forced to become a vampire. So they've got their fun little estrangement. The setting takes place 2,000 years after that. Mm-hmm. That's the backstory. And then they have to deal with their war between the immortals and the vampires and trying to search for this prophecy child. And then we meet a character named Samantha. She's a teenager who has psychic abilities, and she is able to help Leisha escape from a government facility with her psychic abilities. And they kind of go on this grand adventure of trying to seek out this prophecy child and trying to beat both the immortals and the vampires to seeking him out.
And it's great the way you have these two factions, these two warring factions, and then it's a matter of being caught in the middle in a lot of ways for your protagonists.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it.
So tell us a little bit about, if you don't mind, digging into the characters a little bit. What are some of the things that drive them? What are their hopes, their fears, their desires?
Oh, that's a great question. There's a lot of characters I love. One character is actually the villain in the story, and his name is Ta. And I really like him a lot. He's very driven. He has a lot of answers that nobody else on this earth has because he's actually from a different dimension. And so with that knowledge, he's driven a lot by fear and, self-serving motivations, of course. And he's a fun, complex character. And then Leisha, she's driven by her shame. She's ashamed of agreeing to be a vampire. She's ashamed that she has to drink blood to survive, and she abandoned her family. So her motivation is definitely negative in the beginning, but she has her character arc, of course, and learns to accept her choices and own who she is.
With writing a series, every author I know has a different approach. Do you storyboard it or make a vision board? Do you outline? Are you flying by the seat of your pants? How do you actually figure out all of these story arcs and the character arcs and where everything is going?
I am a pantser through and through. I'm constantly flying by the seat of my pants, which is fun. I like it because as I'm writing it, I'm discovering things, and I will sometimes be shocked by what comes out on the paper.
Isn't that a great feeling, though, when it seems like your characters are talking to you and you're not telling them what to do. They're telling you what they want to do.
That's exactly what it's like. Sometimes they get a little mad at me if I try to put it in a different way. They're like, no, I wouldn't do that. Do this.
That's excellent. And I have to imagine that you've done a lot of research because you're pulling in characters that have psychic abilities and you're pulling in history of vampires and legends and lores. Do you have a lot of fun doing the research?
I do, actually. There are so many amazing books and just a lot of stuff on the internet that you can find, wonderful resources about lore and history. And the characters travel quite a bit in the books too, so I wanted to represent the countries they went to as well as I could on top of that. So I get a lot of advertisements for traveling to all these different destinations after I do those searches.
Oh, I bet you do. Come to Romania. No, come to, I guess you need to have your vampires live in the Bahamas or maybe Hawaii, right?
Exactly.
Oh, that's funny. And how about with this series, it seems like it is young adult fiction, but who likes to read your books? Who is your ideal audience?
Actually, my ideal audience is probably more new adult, which is 16 to 24.
Mm-hmm.
However, whoever wants to read it, of course, can read it. I've had stay-at-home dads who are 30 read my book and love it. So, each their own.
And you do write historical romance and do fairy tale retellings, as well as dystopian, right?
That's right. Yes. My fairy tale retellings are what I'm currently working on. And my dystopian series hasn't come out yet, but it should be coming out in a couple of years.
Oh, that's exciting. And in working with other authors, so you help with editing, you do workshops and things of that nature as well.
Uh-huh. Yes, that's correct.
So when you're working with somebody, are you looking at what they're writing and helping them find the different points of the genre to flesh that out? Or do you look at what the market is maybe looking for or not looking for? How do you work with other authors?
I work with other authors in a few different capacities. The younger authors, there's a lot of people who are in high school that want to be, they are aspiring authors. So I'll work with them a little bit on their crafting, but I also help them decide maybe what major when they're looking at colleges would work best for them and their writing career. And I will help edit. I do a lot of content editing when I'm mentoring authors.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't say I'm really good at copy editing. I myself use a professional copy editor for my stuff. But the content is really fun to look at and see what fits. I wouldn't say that I edit to market per se, but it's more of trying to keep true to the story that they're telling while helping them to flesh out the characters and making sure the plot points are really solid and their descriptions are moving the story along.
And I think that content editing is actually probably the funnest, because that is, and just to explain to people who might not be familiar with the different levels of editing, content editing, sometimes it's called developmental editing, is looking more at the big picture. And I'll let you describe it a little bit more too. How are you looking at the big picture or doing the content editing?
For me, it's a little more intuitive. I usually just read through their manuscript, and when something feels off, I analyze and maybe finish their manuscript, and then, where the hole is or why I'm not relating to the character. So I don't necessarily follow a formula, although I will recommend books like Save the Cat to the writers that I'm mentoring to help them figure things out for themselves too, because of course you want them to be able to thrive on their own.
Absolutely. Save the Cat. Well, there's Save the Cat, which was originally done for screenwriters, and then there's Save the Cat Writes a Novel, where they took the basic premise and applied it to novel writing. I agree. I've read both, and I think they're excellent to help guide authors and writers, especially, and it sounds like what you're doing is you're offering them suggestions, but you're not necessarily coming in and ghost writing per se. You're not actually doing the work. You're giving them the guidance that they need so they can make the decisions for themselves.
Correct. Yes. One of the biggest things I try to emphasize with the authors I work with is to keep their natural talent. You don't want to edit a screenplay to the point that all that natural talent is out and it's just simply technically correct.
Exactly. And that's where copy editing, line editing actually comes in. A line editor will go through and look at making sure consistencies are there and making sure they literally go through line by line. That's why it's called that. And then you have your copy editors or your proofers who are worried about grammar and punctuation and spelling and all of that. So those are, kind of like the three basic different types of editing, and they all have their function and they all have their stages that you should go into. So when you're working with an author or when you're working with somebody and you're helping develop their work, I know that you said that you recommend that they read Save the Cat, but what is some other sage advice or tips that you have for new or aspiring writers? What would you like to tell them to do?
I'd say, they may be simple answers, but it's amazing how much of an impact they have when you really take it to heart. And that is, keep reading what you love and keep writing. It's so easy to want to just give up. I think every author I know has wanted to just throw their manuscripts into a fire pit and never look at it again, myself included. And sometimes you need to take a break and take a step back, but really it's just a matter of plugging away and trying to not doubt yourself and to believe in your own talent that you really can finish a manuscript.
Absolutely. And reading, and especially reading within your genre, is something that's so important too. Tell me, who have you read or who do you read? What brought you, I guess, here's the bigger question, what brought you to wanting to write about vampires?
Oh, I can tell you some of my big influencers on the vampire ones. When I was really little, like 5th grade, I read books by Christopher Pike. Mm. And he had, I can't remember how many books, I want to say 8 books for a series called The Last Vampire. And I really loved his stuff when I was that little. And then in junior high, I got into Interview with the Vampire, and then all of those books. And I don't know why the author's name is not coming to my brain, but she's...
Anne Rice.
Thank you, Anne Rice. Like, no one's forgetting her. Anyway, I loved her books. And then, just as I grew older, I would read other books. There's the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series. I liked watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer when I was a teenager. There's a lot of different elements that influenced me wanting to write about vampires.
Yeah, and even right now on Netflix, I know Jonathan Mayberry, and his V Wars has been turned into a series. As well, there's Dracula, the series. So it seems even on television now, obviously we have the books, but a lot of times the books get turned into film, television, etc. So it seems like now is an exciting time to be a vampire writer and a vampire fan.
Yes, well, I, personally would say all the time is an exciting time to be a vampire writer or fan. There's always really fun gems you can find out there. And Jonathan Mayberry is a fantastic author, and I'm thrilled that his series is on Netflix and doing so well.
It seems, too, that with all vampire stories, the ones that strike a chord with us, there's always something that is just a little bit twisted. You can't take the vampire legends and make them too different than what we're used to. But, and I'll go back to the Twilight thing where everybody kind of groaned a little bit because the vampires glistened in the sunlight. So, right. But what are some of the things that you like to do to just take the legends, take the myths, but give them a little bit of a twist, something different?
So do you mean what did I do with my own books with vampires? Or just
yeah. What have you done with your own books, with your own vampires that... And you can even take this into, I know you've been writing some other things as well. What little things do you like to take and twist just a little bit?
Oh, well, there's a lot because I'm doing, the fairy tale retellings right now. There's lots of twisting. Mm-hmm. As for the vampires with my books, the main character, Alicia, she actually could go out in the sunlight and was fine. But no other vampire could, and there was a reason behind that. What I really liked doing, though, is giving them different abilities. So some vampires could use luring, where they kind of psychically reached out to a human and hypnotized them to come to you, sort of like a Dracula type of classic ability. But not all the vampires had that ability. Other vampires were telepathic. Some of them had telekinesis.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had a lot of fun putting different abilities on each individual character to make them unique from each other.
That's a great way to approach it. And you've teased us a few times talking about the fairy tale retelling that you're working on. Do you want to dig into that a little bit more?
You bet, yeah. Let's see. I still try to write paranormal romance genre when I do the fairy tale retellings. So for the Beauty and the Beast one, that was a werewolf romance story with the Beauty and the Beast plot points moving with it. And there's a lot of, magic, but more on a darker element than what you would, I guess Harry Potter is a little bit on the dark side too, but a little more for a mature audience, say 16 and older, for the other stories. It's really fun to put a twist on things, and even if it's just a plot element I'm putting a twist on. In the Cinderella story, Fractured Slipper, she's not actually Cinderella, she just happened to have the same shoe size as Cinderella, because I always thought in my head, I was like, well, just because Cinderella has tiny feet doesn't mean there's no other girl out there that doesn't have the same size. So I put that into my story.
That is so funny. We actually had the author of Soles of Her Feet, which is a Cinderella retelling on not too long ago. And her little twist was that Cinderella had very, very big feet. So there you go.
I love it. That's awesome.
Again, it's just great how you can take an idea and give it a twist, and then you're giving it a retelling and maybe bringing it into the modern era or finding some kind of a message to put behind it. And
Absolutely.
Do you feel that's part of what you like to do as well, whether it's giving a message or helping explain the way things are, or helping people understand the world a little bit? Do you like to put some kind of moral into your storytelling?
Sure. I feel like in order to have a depth with characters and a character development, there does need to be a journey. And what is a journey but not overcoming character weaknesses and becoming a better person as you move on through life. So I feel like every story element definitely has a good moral if you have a character that has overcome things.
Exactly. Now, where can people find out more about you and as well find your books?
You can find me on Amazon, just Adrienne Monson. And if you follow me, my Amazon author profile on Adrienne Monson on Amazon, you can get notifications when all my new books come out. And then, of course, I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, Adrienne Monson.
And as well, if aspiring writers are out there and they might want to get help with their manuscript, they can reach out to you there as well on your website?
They can. They can go to adriennemonson.com and click the contact me information and just send me a message.
I love it. Adrienne, this has been wonderful. Thanks for joining us today. I had so much fun talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Desiree. This was absolutely a lot of fun.
All right. So once again, that's Adrienne Monson, and she is the author of Blood Inheritance Trilogy. As well, she writes historical romance, she retells fairy tales, she writes dystopian and other genre mashups. Plus, she is an advocate and an ally for other authors in the industry, a great content editor if you're looking for one. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today here on Books That Make You. I am your host, Desiree Duffy, and you can find us on our website, that's booksthatmakeyou.com, and you can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and don't forget to sign up for our newsletter because we do so many bookish, fun giveaways. There's contests, there's prizes, there's interviews, and information about all of your favorite books. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.